Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Family&Fusion. So, the United States of America is going through the final phase of its election process. And I thought this would be a very good time to just simply talk about what the election process is and how it goes here in the US. I'm also learning. So, in this video, I would just like to give you a high level understanding of how the election process goes. I'll be talking about the basics of the electoral process, such as how the elections are held, the duration of the process, who can vote and when they can vote, the structure of the government, and finally, the results declaration process. Let's start off with the fundamental differences between the Indian and US governmental systems and the election process. So, first of all, is the head of the state. In India, the government follows a parliamentary form, and so the prime minister holds a real power and is head of the government, while the president of India is the head of state. In the United States, on the other hand, the president holds the real power and is both head of state and government. Next thing is India has a multi-party system. There's BJP, Indian National Congress, Aam Aadmi Party, etc. While the US primarily functions with a two-party system, the Republicans and the Democrats. But there are also independent candidates and parties which aren't affiliated with either of the two. These parties often focus on specific issues or ideologies and aim to provide alternatives to the traditional two system party. The third thing is that the Indian Prime Minister's term lasts for 5 years, and a sitting Prime Minister can be re elected for any number of terms. However, in the US President the US president's term lasts for 4 years, and a sitting president can only be elected for 2 terms. Now, in the 2024 US general elections, the presidential candidates are Mr. Donald Trump for the Republican Party and the current vice president, Ms. Kamala Harris, for the Democratic Party. It is called a general election where not just the president and vice president will be elected, but also the government will be elected and formed. The entire election process takes place in 4 phases. In the first phase, the selection and voting of the best candidate to represent the party is what happens. Of course, this process is far more complicated than what I just said. However, I just wanted to give you a high level understanding that this is what happens in the first phase. In the second phase, a final presidential nominee is selected by the party, and this nominee chooses their running mate, who is the actual vice presidential candidate. Following this, the presidential and vice presidential candidates campaign throughout the country. As part of the campaigns that start a year prior to the elections, one of the events is the presidential and vice presidential debates. These debates happen a couple of times between June and September. This year's was as early as June. And during this debate, the moderators present major controversial topics to the candidates for them to discuss and present to their voters as to why they should be elected based on how they can handle these issues. This is another difference in the election process between the US and India, where in India, such debates do not happen at this level, at the candidate level. But similar to India, each party has its own manifesto for the election. Some of the major areas that are being addressed in this year's election include abortion rights, illegal immigrants and border protection, inflation, middle class empowerment, and foreign policies. Next is phase 3, which is what is happening presently, the general elections, where the people vote for one president and vice president. But actually, when a voter casts their vote, they are voting for a group of people called electors. The role of these electors comes in phase 4. In the fourth and final phase, each elector that forms a part of the Electoral College casts a vote for the candidate they'd like to become president. This happens sometime in December. So once the electoral process selects or votes for the presidential candidate in December, the president who gets finally elected comes into power in January and moves to the White House in Washington. There are in total 538 electoral votes. And in order for a presidential win, a candidate needs to secure 270 of the 538 electoral votes. Just to clarify, when a voter votes in their state, that contributes towards what's called the popular vote. But the nationwide popular vote does not necessarily mean that the person they elect for wins the presidential election. It is the electoral votes cast by the members of the Electoral College which determine the outcome of a presidential election. As I mentioned, there are a total of 538 electoral votes, and a candidate must win at least 270 in order to be elected president. So, what are electoral votes? Under the system, each state is allocated a certain number of electoral votes, which is determined by its size. So, there are 538 electoral votes, as I mentioned, and of these, the largest belong to California, having 54, and Texas, having 40. Being in Georgia, I've come to know that Georgia has 16 electoral votes. In India, the count for each party remains with the party that wins. However, in the US, whichever party wins a majority of the electoral votes in a state gets all of those votes for the state, meaning it is not split between the two parties. In the past, there have been presidents like Mr. Donald Trump who lost the popular vote, which is the vote cast by the masses in 2016, where Hillary Clinton won it, but won the Electoral College and thus became president. In the US, there are 50 states in total, and for most of the states, voters are mostly aligned to a fixed party as per history. Some are Democrats and some are Republican. Then there are some states called swing states. These states are so called because most of the time they flip from one party to the other and ultimately decide who will win. The swing states historically have been Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. Now let's talk about the voting process from a voter's perspective. In India, the voting process happens in phases and mostly is in person voting. Although in 2024, the vote from home option was available to persons above 80 years of age and to persons with disabilities. In the US, there are a few options. There is vote by mail or absentee ballot, where states send ballots to all registered voters by mail, and the voters can either mail in their ballot or drop it off at designated locations. These are, as I mentioned, also called absentee ballots, and the rules vary from state to state. The next option is early voting, with states opening the early voting option as early as 40 days prior to the election date or as late as 5 days. The last and final option is in person voting, which is the final election day. This year, November 5th, 2024, which is the Tuesday after the first Monday of November, was the day for in person voting. The voting booths, also called precincts, opened up as early as 5 a.m. in some states. And here in Georgia, they opened up at 7 a.m. and ran all the way till 7 p.m. In the evening. We went to a precinct this morning to get an understanding of the process and had the opportunity to talk to a couple of voters. We asked several of our questions to get an understanding of the process, and these voters were gracious enough to provide us their responses. Here are some glimpses of the sample ballot that a voter would look at while voting. You can see the names of the candidates for president as well as for the Senate House, and on the second page for the county level.
So what you have to first show is like your ID or your place of residency and all.
Okay.
And then from there you would have to you get like a card to like sign in, as in to like register to be able to vote.
Okay. Was that today?
Oh yeah, that was today.
Okay, the registration.
There was like an earlier process, but usually many people come in and do in person. You can do like a mail-in ballot, but many people come in and just do it early. Like many people just come in.
Yeah, the early ones got over on the 5th,
Yeah, the early ones were before. But many people just come in and do it now.
Okay.
In person, which I think is more easier because if you have a location, you just go in and.
So how do you get the location?
Well, I'm independent right now, so like I can.
Do you just walk in here?
Yeah, I mean, from my knowledge, 'cause I'm independent, so I know from just come in and everything. But I'm not sure if there's like a specific registration for it.
Okay.
But anyways, for the actual ballot, like you sign in, you get like ticket to go in.
Okay.
You see not just for obviously the presidency, but you also see for state senate, for example.
Okay.
Republican, Democrat, whatever it is. And it's not just voting for your president, but it's also voting for the government as well.
Okay.
From there, and also from what I've seen, like few laws and stuff regarding that.
Right. That's the sample ballot. So it looks. So your actual ballot looks exactly like this.
Not exactly like this, but like, yeah, it is similar. Yes, similar topics. That's obviously in a different format.
But there are
yes.
more. Are there more in there in the actual?
Yes, there's
ballot?
a few more.
There's a few. Okay. And even for these for the government part as well.
Yes.
There's more. Okay. So is it just one? Is it on a paper? Is it on a piece of paper?
No, it's on a digital screen.
It's on a digital screen. Yeah.
It takes from page to page.
Page to page. Okay. Okay. And how are the polling booths like sectionalized like that with covers between people?
Yeah, it's comes from top to sides.
Okay.
Not for the back because the back is gonna be there, but it's coming from side to side, so no one can really see.
Okay.
If anything.
All right. So thank you so much. What was your name?
Prashant.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. So thank you so much for helping us out with some of that information. So can you tell us, just in general, what is the process that a person who can vote follows, like from the very beginning? If you can tell us, like, how do they
from the voter perspective?
Yes, from the voter perspective.
Well, so today's election is the general election, right? So back in May, so we're in the northern suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, north of Atlanta in Forsyth County, Georgia. So we had our primary back in May, and what happens is there's two primary parties, there's Republican and Democrat, and they will, you might have several candidates from the same party. So that kind of like, we made those party decisions on who's going to represent the party back in May. And so today's the general election, so that it's narrowed down. So they will have had to register to vote. Okay. And there is windows in there, like there's a cutoff for obvious reasons that a person can register to vote. But then, they have to be a resident in the area where they're voting. So we have districts. And, so they'll go in, they'll present their ID card, some form of ID. So they'll go in, they in essence are saying, hey, I live in the district, I'm a registered voter. And then they will go in and you'll see the machines. They use a voting machine here and they will select their candidates. Sometimes it's a short list. Today's going to be a much longer list. There's a lot of things that are going on. Because we're not only voting for candidates, we're voting on issues that affect our community here in Forsyth, but also in the state as well. Okay. They will, on the screen, they will be able to look at all of the candidates and issues that they voted for. And once, they've reviewed that and they're sure that, that their selection is accurate, they press a button and they close out the ballot. And then that prints it prints a physical sheet, which they then will take over to a scanner and they will scan it into the scanner. It tabulates the votes off of not the machine where they voted, but on the scanner. It also takes a picture of that ballot, as well. So it's well documented because you have the number, you have the paper, and you have the picture. So in Georgia, we are able to have an audit, a fully auditable trail of how a vote occurred. And we started updating these laws back in 2019. I actually was in the Georgia General Assembly at that time. I represented House District 26 when we passed that law and brought in the new voting machines. So for the first time ever at that point, we had a fully auditable trail. And it's actually the county that's responsible for running the elections. So although the state will hand them the guidelines to do that.
So how do you know that, this spot is, or this location is allocated for you? Do you just walk in or do you get that before?
Okay, so great question. So today is election day and everyone has to vote in their own precinct. We receive cards. Yeah, it's called a precinct. So on election day, I have to go to my precinct. But on early voting, we will have like up to 4 locations in the county where you can go vote, and you can vote anywhere, any of those early voting locations. For example, I voted at the voter registrar's office.
So in India, after you vote, you get an India ink, I think it's called, on your finger. Is there something like that that's done here?
No, there's not anything done like that here. I think some of the interesting things is in the beginning, a candidate has to go and qualify. So there's a qualifying process. So when I ran for the House, I basically had to certify that I had lived in that district for a year beforehand. So there was a residency requirement. And then, obviously, campaigns, they cost money. And so, there are processes that are set up for us to report money that we might raise and who we collected it from and how we spent it. So there's Georgia has I think it's called the Georgia Transparency website. And, so you can go take a look and see how much money a candidate raised. And there are thresholds for reporting. Anything over $100 has to be reported. And there is a cycle that happens several times a year that we would have to report in on what we received. So today, election day, we use what's called an Electoral College. And that means is that let's say we have 5 million votes here in Georgia. It'll probably be somewhere maybe a little more. Well, whoever gets the majority of those votes will win all of the electoral votes. And then in December, I believe it is, they will meet in Washington. And then what happens, those electors will go to Washington and they will cast their votes for the candidate that won. So it's kind of a winner gets all of the electoral votes.
Oh, so then what result comes out tomorrow? If something's happening in December, then what comes out tomorrow?
Each county will have to certify their election. Okay. So they're going to go in and they're going to make sure, hey, the votes are right. They're accurate. The big thing that happens will be, it'll be I think at the end of the week, when we certify the elections, we turn those in to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State's office will certify the election. And then those votes like I said, in December, you will have your delegates and they will go to Washington and then it'll be televised there and they will cast those votes. So I believe in Georgia, it's based off of the number of representatives that you have in the state. And then that's why you'll hear tonight as you watch the news, 270 is the magic number in votes. It's 270 electoral votes. So you take each state, many of the states have different numbers. California is a large number. New York's a large number. I think Georgia's 16. We have 16 votes here.
All together?
Yeah. So those 16 votes go into it. So when you look at like tonight, when you start watching it on television, you will see the states as they're declared a winner in that state. You'll see all those electoral votes go to one candidate. And the one that gets to 270 will be our next president.
All right.
Now there's one state out west that I know that they actually split their votes. Like, they say they'll look at it as, they'll divide them equally. I think they have like 5 votes. So if someone gets 60% of the vote, they'll get 3 votes. If the other person, will get 2 votes in that.
Okay.
But most states do not do that because what happens is the states really lose their influence at that point
Mhm.
because you can end up with a state. I think Colorado had that on their ballot back in 2012, and they looked at it and said, "Hey, we've got 9 votes, and at the end of the day, it's so evenly split. The net will only be 1 vote for the winner." Right. And then, so the feeling is that the candidates wouldn't come to Colorado and campaign, that they would see. Education qualification a candidate should have. Typically it's not mandated by law. Yeah. So there's, not like a degree or that is mandated. For the U.S. House, Senate, and the presidency, there are age limitations in there. Then they have to do a certain. Okay. And then for the president, there's a citizenship requirement, and I they have to be U.S. born citizen. And,
Okay. US born citizen.
yeah.
Okay. The other question I have in India, basically anyone can be a candidate. Like they can
Okay.
independently become a candidate also.
All right.
So is there a possibility in US like you can become an independent candidate?
Yes. Yeah, there's a qualifying process for it to become an independent. In fact, if you look at the ballot today for the number of candidates that are listed for president, there'll be, I think, at least 4 that are independent candidates.
So how does that go? Whether they have to merge at the end to Democrat or Republican, or they have to be independent also?
They will be an independent, so they won't be aligned with the parties because the parties pick their candidates already in there, and so they each have one. But what they will do is they will go to the Secretary of State's website, and they will, or excuse me, not the website, but there'll be a qualifying day that they have to qualify for, pay a fee to do that, and get their name on the ballot here. I think they have to collect so many signatures on there to be deemed a candidate as well.
Okay, so what will happen in the situation when none of the major parties like Republican or Democrat crosses 270 mark?
So if they don't get to 270, then I believe that it's the U.S. House of Representatives that will make the decision. It will go to the floor of the House. There was some conversations on that a few years ago, and I don't know the exact numbers in the process, but I do know that then it gets handled by the Congress. But we haven't had that. I think it's maybe once in our history that's happened.
Suppose I am an independent candidate. I got a highest vote from here. I won from here. Okay, but I don't belong to any party. I don't belong to the Democrat or Republican. So at the end, all 16 vote, like you mentioned, from Georgia will go to Democrat or Republican. So I'll be part of one of them, right? By default.
No.
No, you would be, in that case, if you were able to win it as an independent, then you would go as an independent. It wouldn't go,
To either party.
It wouldn't go to a specific
So
party.
okay,
Yeah. So generally by the time you get to that, the numbers are so massive that an independent on a NAS ticket, I think at best I've seen them capture somewhere in the area of 2 to 3%. But I've never seen them capture a state in
Okay.
there.
Okay. And how many total number of electoral seats in entire US?
How many states? So we have 50 states, and so you'll have 535 votes. Because I think you have 435 representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives, and then 100, and you have 100 senators. So if 270 is the number, yeah. So the number total is 535. But 270, guarantees you the majority in that. If you see the trends in there, strangely, because they've already kind of, with the pollings, they kind of know how the West is going to go, with the exception of maybe I think Nevada is still in play, and maybe New Mexico. But tonight, as you watch it, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Watch those states. That's going to make the difference in the
They're the swing states?
in the note.
Those are the swing states.
Those will likely determine where the election goes.
What about Georgia? Last time I thought it was a swing state.
Yeah, so I'm predicting Georgia. I'm predicting a Trump win by 3% at least.
Okay.
And there, I think it's going to go red. Florida will definitely go red, and they'll go early. But the momentum is there. But let me just tell you, elections are like football games. Okay, it just depends on who shows up and who finishes strong. You know,
Right.
and so, you know, as a conservative, you know, Republican. I'm hopeful that it will be Mr. Trump, but whoever it is, you know, if it is, Vice President Harris, she will be our president, and I will do my best to support her where I can. And that. And, you know, so we're all gonna, you know, a lot of friends are hashing this out. This is causing a lot of strife this is a very contentious election. And I mean, friendships are being fractured and even families over this. And I think it's that time, you know, tomorrow we need to get back to working on our friendships and our relationships, you know, and remember that, hey, as a country, we have issues, right? And we need to focus on those moving forward. So I hope that gives you some insight into it. You know, it's a very complicated process, this entire thing. And even those of us that, you know, that are engaged in it regularly sometimes don't know all the answers and get things wrong.
But
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
It's,
Okay.
Polls are closing in the subsequent time zones in the US, and the counting has started or is already midway through, and it already looks like they're swinging in favor of Mr. Donald Trump. Ultimately, whoever wins this election, we hope that they do what's best for the United States and its citizens. So I hope through our interviews and some of the information that I gave out at the beginning of this video, you were able to get a high-level understanding of the electoral process here. As I mentioned, it's a very complex process, and I've just touched the tip of that iceberg. However, this gives you a general idea of how the process goes here. So please do like this video, share it amongst the people you know, and please do subscribe to Family&Fusion if you haven't done so already. Thank you for watching till the end of this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.